We look back 48 years to the Canada-Russia Summit Series and what it did to help Canadian pride across the nation. Now, the Canada-Russia Summit Series was 3 years in the making, as Canada had refused to play in any international hockey tournament without professionals. At the time, the only people allowed to play in international hockey were amateurs, no professionals allowed. So instead of the Olympics, Canada went to Russia, as Russians were dominating the international hockey scene, as they had no professional league, so all of their best players could play. Before Russia came into the league, however, Canada dominated the world hockey, winning 10 of 15 World Cups and Olympics. Because of this, Canadians thought that their best players could beat any country with ease, stating that the Russians would be lucky to even win one game. Being a super team, the Canadians were overconfident. Serge Savard said, all throughout training camp, I don't think we really put enough emphasis on defense. All the time it was goals, goals. How many goals were we going to beat them by? Even goalie Jacques Plante admitted to feeling sorry for the Soviet goalie, and before Game 1 went into the Soviets' dressing room to tell him about Canadian players' shooting habits. Game 1. Game 1 started off right for the Canadians, as Phil Esposito scored just 30 seconds in. It looked as though the Canadians were right, and this would be a cakewalk. However, by the end of the first, the Russians had tied it up. The Russians had better conditioning and arguably more skill and easily took the first game 7-2. Canada and the whole hockey world was stunned. The lineup was changed for the second game with more emphasis on defense, which ended up working as the Canadians won 4-1. This series was so big that Phil Esposito even said, "This is bigger than winning the cup." Game 3 started well for the Canadians, being up 4-2, but by the end of the game it was a tie, 4-4. Game 4 went worse for the Canadians, as they lost 5-3. The Canadian fans were so fed up. All throughout the night, fans booed the Canadians. It was so bad, Phil Esposito said,
For the people that boo us, geez, all of us guys are really disheartened and we're disillusioned and we're disappointed in some of the people. We cannot believe the bad press we've got, the booing we've gotten in our own buildings.
The Canadians, defeated and disheartened, then flew to Sweden for 2 exhibition games and won the first game 4-1 and tied the second 4-4. In Russia, the team finally started to bond. They gained trust and chemistry with one another. They also started seeing how much this meant to Canadians, as 3,000 fans traveled with them. People started to understand this was as much a hockey battle as it was one of political ideologies. Game 5 started right for the Canadians, as they were up by 3 by the start of the third, but they gave up their lead to lose 5-4. Now, down by 2 games, the Canadians were unable to lose another, or the series would be lost. In Game 6, Canada was up 3-1 in the second period, and they were thankfully able to hold on, winning 3-2 with a game-winning goal scored by Paul Henderson. Game 7 had Paul Henderson scoring the game-winning goal again with just 2 minutes and 6 seconds remaining, giving Canada the chance at Game 8. For Canadians, Game 8 was do or die. The Russians had more goals than them, so a tie would mean a Russian victory. Controversy was also big. In Game 6, Bobby Clarke deliberately slashed Valery Kharlamov in the ankle, taking him out of Game 6 and 7, and dampening his skill in Game 8. More known to Canadians, however, was the biased refereeing in Europe. Russia insisted on having Josef Kampala of East Germany officiate the final game, and this brought many red flags to Canadian fans, as Josef called many questionable penalties in Game 8, leading to 3 power play goals. Game 8, the final. The final game started in the Russians' favor with 2 early penalties called on the Canadians. The Russians were able to put in a power play goal. After one more questionable call, Jean-Paul Parise threatened to hit Kampala with his stick and was immediately thrown out of the game. Despite the penalties, the game was tied 2-2 by the end of the first. However, by the end of the second, the score was 5-3 for the Russians. Even though they were down, the Canadians wouldn't give up, as Phil Esposito scored just 2 minutes and 27 seconds into the third to make it 5-4. Then, the Canadians scored again at 12:56. With time winding down, it seemed as though all was lost, until Paul Henderson hopped the boards and started down the ice with a pass from Yvan Cornier. As Henderson lost the puck, all of Canada held their breath. Esposito fired the puck towards the goal. Tricek stopped it, but the rebound was right there, and who better to pick it up and put it in than Paul Henderson?
Henderson made a wild stab towards Bell. Here's another shot, right by the score! And he's done it!
With his third game-winning goal in a row, Canada had scored to take the lead with 34 seconds left. Canada held on and won 6-5. Significance. This series had long-lasting impacts on not only hockey, but Canada. Although Canada's hockey superiority complex was gone, Canada showed that we are tougher and more determined than other countries. It opened Canadian hockey to the rest of the world, bringing European players to the NHL, and Canadian teams traveled overseas more often to play against European ones. The Summit Series gave Canada pride. It showed we never quit and we always find ways to adapt. During Game 8, all of Canada was at a standstill. Businesses closed, TVs were brought into classrooms and community centers, just so that people could watch the final game. It was estimated that 3/4 of all of Canada watched that game. The goal of the century is what it was called, and much like Crosby's golden goal in 2010, every Canadian who was alive at the time remembers where they were and how they celebrated. Canada had never won anything like this. Yeah, they had Olympic golds, but it would never compare to this.
If it had been today, they probably would have had a parade for them. They probably would have shut down the country for them. We didn't know how to do all those things. We didn't even know how to celebrate because, you know, it was the first time we had gone through something like this. We just knew we were proud.
These were the best, going to war for a month, and we came out victorious.